Hello and welcome to another episode of Laying Down the Lore 40K, a lore podcast in which we aim to separate our Drukhari from our Dark Angels, our Tyranids from our Tau, and our Craft Worlds from our Chaos Marines, and generally ask, what's up with this Warhammer 40K stuff? My name is Ben Crone Barber and I know pretty much fuck all about 40K. With me is my co-host Christopher Crowlin Allen.
I'm here.
Who knows absolutely fuck all about 40K.
Very true.
And my dear brother Darren.
I may or may not be here.
Who knows so much about 40K it's a wonder he has time to do anything else. Over the years, this dichotomy between our levels of understanding became clear, and this series is an attempt to address that ignorance.
Hooray!
Whoop, whoop, whoop. Harumble! Whoop, whoop. Do you know, I've just discovered the key to getting that intro done in roughly one take, which is to move the script over your video feeds so that you can't distract me as you constantly try to do while I'm doing the intro.
Well, I guess I'm going to take my elephant disguise off.
Oh, Darren, hi. Sorry.
Mystery solved.
Oh, that was a trunk. Right, okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
So.
All right.
Actually, do you know what? Get that elephant back in here. Right. Are we quizzing it?
Or do you want into the galactical galaxy of 40K?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Do you want,
lads,
me in...
how about you shut up? How about that? How about you shut up
Cranky
and let me go on with the thing
today,
that you're forcing
everybody?
me to do? Yep, I'll do that. You just sit there. Eye candy. That's what you are, mate. Eye candy for the podcast. We're going to use your face in all the thumbnails, and that'll just bring them screaming in, right? So, we'll get down to these fucking questions that I have to ask.
You seem really happy about the fact that you're asking these questions.
Don't worry about Darren. He's just got a bit of sand in his vagina.
Yeah.
It's all right, Darren. It's all right. He just doesn't know. He just doesn't know. It's not bad. It's your job to teach him. So here we go. Question.
It's not his fault. It's not his fault.
It's not his fault. Someone name the 2.5 aspects of reality that we've covered last week.
Corporeal universe, the warp, and the webway.
Get in.
Excellent. Points to Chris, who is actually, for no sudden reason, my favourite. Now.
Sudden reason. Yes, because that's never been the case up till now.
You mentioned the warp there. What does a ship travelling through the warp need and why?
What does it need?
Ooh.
As in, what does it need to travel through the warp, do you mean?
I believe the question stands by itself, Chris.
Did I stutter, motherfucker?
Wow, I feel really naughty all of a sudden. Okay. What does it need? It needs a pocket full of hope and positivity, positive thoughts.
Oh my God, you're being serious. No, it doesn't.
Does it... okay, it needs to be navigated. It needs a point of navigation.
Okay.
Or does it need? Are you talking about its power source? It needs a certain power source.
Come on. Let's say you mentioned the word navigation there. Let's expand that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Navigators, which are the psychers with the third eye.
Exactly right.
In the I can't remember that big globular thing in the Himalayas. I can't remember what it's called now. It's basically the big lighthouse. The Astronomica.
The Astronomicon. Exactly right. And
that's not Astronomicon.
No, it is the Astronomicon.
Astronomicon or Astronomica?
Astronomicon.
Oh, okay.
Astronomicon.
I've been to that festival.
Yeah. It's a convention.
That's the one.
I can tell by the giant eye in the middle of your chest.
You mutant.
It's my third nipple.
It's your third nipple.
Do they also need a Geller field? A Ross Geller field?
Yes, they do. How did you hear about that? Oh yeah, I mentioned them in episode 1.
It's the thing that... Were you about to accuse me of doing extracurricular research?
Yes, it does. And what does a Gellerfield do?
Makes terrible, terrible jokes. Oh no, that's the Ross Gellerfield.
No,
hold on, that's Darren Barber. It keeps out the warp energies and stops it from getting in the ship and basically fucking everyone up.
Exactly right. It's a spiritual force field.
Nice. I need one.
Much like I have to engage every day with my children. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I was just going to do another analogy, and it wasn't even funny, so we'll move on.
That's unlike you.
Right, so that's 2 for 2 for Kralin.
So the final question of the 3 questions I'm forced to ask under protest. Can you... Hang on, let me do some quick counting. Can you name the 5 types of worlds, or name the 5 situations, or hang on a second. Let's try again, Dar. Can you ask a question? Can you? Can you? Well, this bit is going great, I have to say.
Yeah, it's
can
fucking
you?
awesome.
No, Darren, can you?
No.
Obviously
What
not.
are the logical stages between the discovery of a new world by an agent of the Imperium and the situation where you have billions of Imperial citizens living in a single city? What are the types of world it must travel through?
Crow, you got this.
The frontier world
Excellent.
into the feral world or primal world.
There's a bit of a crossover there, but yes, feral world would be a good position to have.
Feral, then the feudal world.
Yeah.
Then I can't remember what the one after that.
Is it the civilized world?
Yes.
Excellent.
And finally,
a hive world.
a hive world! Hooray!
Harumble!
Yahtzee!
Hooray! Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
So technically, frontier worlds can be any type of world that's newly discovered, usually with a sparse population, and they more frequently turn into mining worlds or waste worlds or industrial worlds as technology is brought online, or indeed the armory worlds or fortress worlds. But in general, the evolution is feral to feudal, feudal to civilized, and then civilized either goes full industrial or straight to the hive model.
Right, okay.
Nice.
Yeah, that's cool.
Ben, what is the immediate area around Terra and our solar system which is dominated by the Imperium of Manbu?
It's got the word solar in it. Is it solar sectum? Secta?
I can't remember that name,
Secta solar?
Sectarum.
Potato?
Sectarum. I'm just going to say it over and over again. Sectarum.
Think of Terry's chocolate orange.
Segmenta.
There you go. Segment.
Excellent. Do you know what, Kral? Between the two of us, we're like one normal person. Like we've got like.
Not even,
okay,
mate.
yeah. I kind of bottled out halfway through that. I was like, where are you going with that one, Ben?
Oh, fucking hell.
Oh, he's
You
fucking
just said
forgotten it.
Solaris. And Ben, within Segmenta Solaris, what are the 4 main regions? North, east, south, and west.
Is it Segmentus Solaris or Segmentus Solar?
I have no idea. I think I've actually dropped acid now, and I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. We are way beyond 40k right now.
Right. Okay. So sorry, you're asking what the name of the other regions?
There's like
are?
4 quadrants, isn't there,
me, Chris,
within
that's-
the Segmenta Solaris?
Oh, you're
not true?
so close, but at the same time, completely wrong. It's the segmentum solar is in the center, and then you have stuff
then
to
there's
the
the 4
galactic
around
north of that around it. Yeah.
Okay. Surrounding the Segmenta Solaris, what are the 4 main quadrants?
So there's Segmenta, Ultima Segmenta.
Yep,
right?
that's where the giant oranges are. Yep. The
Right.
ultimate segments.
The ultimate segment. What is the name of it? Is it
The
Segmenta?
ultimate segmentum.
Okay.
Where the
that
Ultramarines
one.
hang out. That's their HQ.
Is it?
In the south, you've got Segmenta Tempest, and in the west, Segmenta Pacifica. Not a lot happens in the west. It's kind of a
I
bit
see
of a
your
frontier
eyes
type
traveling
vibes.
up to one side. Are you looking at a map?
No, I'm looking at my input level to make sure it's not distorting.
Yeah, whatever. You cheating
Warhammer
bastard.
40K is owned by a company called Games Workshop Ltd.
Are you on that fucking chat GTP?
Wow, I'm impressed, Growl. I wasn't. I paid attention.
I just can't remember what the northern one is. I can't remember what the northern segment is.
Obscurus.
Segmenta Obscurus.
Obscurus, sorry.
Is that the biggest one? That's where most of the kind of warring with Xenos.
No,
occurs.
that happens in the east, Ben.
No, that's the ultimate. That's the ultimate.
Oh, that's
segment.
the ultimate, right?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, the Obscurus is where the Eye of Terror is, if you recall.
Bonus question for you, Ben. What was the name of the group of people that tore the Milky Way in half?
Oh, it's not the name of it. It was the 13th Black Crusade, was it not?
Way!
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent.
Although
me.
it's generally accepted the Great Rift was the goal of the 13th Black Crusade, but it's not been stated that that's actually what it was. So it happened immediately at the close of the Black Crusade.
Uh-huh.
But it was the chaos. It was the forces of chaos.
The forces of chaos.
What would those forces have been comprised of? Would that have been purely demons, or would it have been?
No, I think reading through the codices, I think it's mostly disaffected teens.
Angsty young adolescents.
It's space emos. Yep.
Yeah.
Space emos.
No, you're looking at
playing the 40k version of Placebo.
Yeah, you've got the Chaos Space Marine Legions and then Renegade Space Marine chapters. Those two are quite distinctly different. You've got Chaos Traitors, so Chaos Imperial regiments that go to Chaos. Then plus every flavor of demon that you can think of, that you can come up with, are there as well. And that causes such a huge army. It's important to note that the difference between Chaos Legions and Renegade Chapters are the average under 1,000 Space Marines. The kind of de facto size of a Space Marine chapter is 1,000 Marines, 1,000 battle brothers, plus all the administrative and supporting staff. Chaos Legions are effectively what the Space Marine Legions used to be 10,000 years ago. So you're like the Ultramarines had in excess of 500,000 troops.
500,000 Marines.
500,000 Marines. Much, much larger. Much larger. And so a lot of the 9 Space Marine Legions that fell to Chaos were of that kind of size. So there's a lot of attrition, but also they've worked out how to create new Space Marines, create new Chaos Marines. They retained that knowledge from the early days. So
when
we're not talking about small armies. We're talking about arguably hundreds of thousands of genetic supermen that are evil.
So when you talk about the kind of transition from legions to chapters, was that exclusively within the Imperium? Like did the
Yes.
chaos?
Yeah.
Is chaos still formed of legions rather than chapters?
I mean, we'll cover this when we do the summary episode on chaos, but short answer is yes. Space Marine, the chapter size, the 1,000 Battle Brother size, is exclusively for the Imperium. The Chaos Legions, some of them did fracture into war groups, war bands. I'm thinking specifically things like the World Eaters, who are the followers of Khorne, who just descended into just battle lust. And they had a great kind of self-destructive battle at Scalathrax that fractured them from a cohesive legion into the many kind of war bands that exist today. So there are different sizes of the original Chaos Legions, but in general, you're looking at quite significantly sized, vast armies of genetic super terrors.
Nice.
Horrific.
Horrific.
So now that we've suitably exhausted that recap, where are we going? What's today?
Well, last episode we went through the setting in terms of the physical setting, the galaxy, which is our Milky Way, the kind of administrative regions of the Imperium, and really we're doing this to gain the kind of humanocentric understanding of 40K, because I think that's a strong starting point from which to then compare other factions, other civilizations, other races, and will give you a good grounding in what it means to be human in 40K. It's arguably the most relatable section. So what I thought we'd do is just a really quick summary of 30,000 years, and and try not to drag on as much as the well-meaning but perhaps ill-conceived episodes where we just broke Kral.
Good news, though, he's not bleeding out his nose this time.
Not bleeding out his nose. No.
I've run out of blood to bleed. So
Nobody makes me bleed my own blood.
So I will preface this by saying we're looking at the history of humankind. We're going to use the word man a lot, mankind. Please understand it's just the vernacular I have. I will make an effort to make sure it's humanocentric, humankind, this kind of thing, to be as inclusive as possible, but also not inclusive at all because it's a totalitarian state, the Imperium of Man. So, I'm on the fence. We will cover from present day because, as mentioned, the universe of 40K is our universe. We exist in that setting right now. Obviously, most, if not all of it, is fictional, but there's a good grounding of, history, this kind of idea. So we're going to start from the first millennium to the 15th millennium. That's really the first chunk of, the first epoch of time. And what's an epoch, Ben?
Oh, fuck knows, mate. Sounds like a pocket on a pair of trousers. What's an
No,
epoch?
it's a Yorkshireman discovering a pock.
Oh, yes, yeah. Epoch.
Epoch.
Is it some sort of measurement of time?
Yes, it's an incredibly long stretch of time. That first 15,000 years is referred to as the Age of Terra. Now,
Terra or terror?
Terra.
With an A.
Terra.
For those who are already familiar with the expanded history of the 40K universe, I will say that the universe does not start at year one. There is a pseudo-secret history to 40K that we will unravel together over this introduction series. It's going to take a while. As has been highlighted, there is an absolute ton of lore and data, but we're going to keep it focused on humans for now, for the next, well, I'm not going to say that, for now.
For the next foreseeable lifetime. Got it.
For the next foreseeable, for at least the Age of Terra. So, the Age of Terra really is the kind of, not golden age, but it's the expansion age of humanity. So it goes from, let's use the AD classification. It goes from 1 AD to 14,999 AD, and has a growth of humans or an evolution of human culture from our current day to this kind of constant reinvention of industry, of technology, and of a capacity not only to expand out from Terra, but also to terraform the worlds that we encounter. Now, as we said last episode, the segmentum solar really serves as the full boundary of expansion during that time. It simply wasn't possible to travel any further than that from Terra because not only was the warp not really understood or experienced, but the technology to be able to move through that system didn't exist. So really, you're looking at sublight speed generational ships where everything had to be loaded on, and people, material. This is when the STCs started to be loaded onto the ships as well. This is the Swiss Army knife of technology for colonization. And really, once you were put in this ship, it was either you were alive and it was a generational ship, so it would be your great grandkids or great to the power of n grandkids that would arrive at the planet, or you were put in suspended animation and humanity spread amongst the stars. So really we're looking at the late 2000s is where humanity starts to spread out and gets colonies outside of our own solar system. So all of the planets within our solar system were either colonized or had space stations and colonies built around them. Resources were harvested to further this kind of technological drive. Now, it should be said that during this time, there wasn't really like the concept of a world government. Countries still existed and thus entered into conflict. But in general, that is the totality of what is known about that 15,000 years in summary form.
Oh, wow, that was quick. Bloody hell.
Yeah.
And next month.
I'm amazed.
How are you feeling, Chris? Is that all right?
Bring on the next 15,000 years, bro.
Yeah.
Just kind of, this is like maybe splitting hairs a bit too much, but still valid. At this period in the Age of Terror, you've got two kinds of explorational type ships. You've got one where they might put you in stasis and then you would awake on the other end of the journey, or you've got one where you've got alive conscious beings and they would have children and they would have, and after several generations, those, like you say, grandkids or so, great grandkids would then be the people landing or at the front of that frontier, that exploratory campaign. In that situation, there's going to be like a danger if you've got several generations stuck, isolated on a ship that, socially, politically, their drive, their ambition, the original mission is going to get diluted, and there's going to be, do you know what I mean? Shit can go wrong. There's you've multiplied the factors of failure by several hundred, things that people just go mental or like lose the plot, don't they?
Oh, absolutely right. And the chances of success were 1 in 6.
That's awfully specific.
Right.
1 in 6.
Yeah.
Is that stated in the lore?
Oh yeah, it absolutely is by me just now.
I'm always so suspicious when you come up with these things like 98%. Well, that sounds oddly specific, Tara. Well, yes, it is. I just made it up.
But hyperbole, of course, but it's just underlines Chris's point of not only the dangers of this kind of generational travel, but also the issues of culture. So when you're setting off to occupy or colonize a distant planet, are you really still Terran? Are you really associated with Terra? Or do you now have to dedicate your life and the life of your people and your children and their children to that individual colony?
And the original mission set out by the Terran government, Terran Empire, again, that could be diluted, forgotten, manipulated by the time you're 7 generations into a mission.
Well, that's it. I mean, you'd be
fuck it. We're millions of light years away. Let's start our own thing.
It's crazy to think of it as like that single ship going on that journey as well, because it would be a completely different set of people that would arrive. So it's like that whole thing of like, oh, I've had this broom for 20 years. I've only changed the head 4 times and the handle 5 times.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Is it really is it the same mission?
Yeah, but I think that these are great points well made, because it feeds into the later kind of isolationist identities of a lot of these planets. They become their own thing. They are effectively Earth in name, or Terran in name only. They are their own planet, their own culture. Some of them have their own kind of
Handshakes.
handshake. I was going to say some of them have their own mini empires as the millennia progress, and handshakes. Yeah.
Would they? I mean, is there a strong possibility of them forgetting their origins by the time they arrived?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
forgetting
Well,
who Terra
as we
is?
move towards the kind of start of the 30th millennium, so 15,000 years after this period of time comes to a close, you know, they believe that they evolved fully on, or some of them believe they have evolved fully on this planet, and that there are legends of how their ancestors came from the stars. But really, does any intelligent person believe that? So, you know, it's, and their technology evolves in a different way. They're kind of socio-religious.
They drive on the right-hand side of the road. Yeah.
All their hive cities are built at 45 degrees rather than straight up. So that's really
And that's the Age of Terra. Is that right?
That's the Age of Terra. So that's really the first kind of galactic bloom of humans' kind of manifest destiny. Lots of encounters with alien races, an incredible amount of bloodshed and war. You're looking at colonies just kind of blipping out of existence because of alien attack, piracy. There may have been some influence of warp entities at this time. It's interesting to note that in some of the more esoteric books and sources of lore, that it's during this time that 3 of the 4 gods of chaos gain sentience. And I think we've covered this to some extent in the fantasy podcast, Laying Down the Lore of the Old World, that it's said that Nurgle manifested during the Black Death, during the plague. Right. Khorne manifested during the Mongol hordes and or the attack of the Mongol hordes, and Tzeentch manifested during the Renaissance. As kind of the scales fell from people's eyes. Now, I read an interesting piece recently where someone was saying that it's not that these gods were manifested by those human actions, but those human actions reflected the manifestation of those gods in the warp, where the echo of Nurgle's birth was the plague. The echo of Khorne's birth was the rise of the most bloodthirsty empire that's ever existed in human history. The explosion of Tzeentch's kind of bailiwick of hope and change precipitated the Renaissance.
Right. That's a cool idea, man.
Yeah. I thought that was a really clever take on it. Not my own take personally, but I think I would certainly lean towards that.
Fuck it, you take it. Just
no, I wouldn't do that to someone. Where the
fine, I'll take it.
It's great, Ben. Great idea. Great.
Thanks, pal.
Do you know what? You're my favorite again.
I like to think Slaanesh was manifested during the boom of 70s and 80s porn.
Please don't use the word boom.
Yeah. The spaloosh of 70s and 80s porn.
The
80s sploosh.
I just threw up a little bit. There are other aspects of the kind of secret histories that carry on through the Age of Terra, and we will cover them, but I think they're best covered when we talk about the Emperor, because he gives great insight into the mysteries of 40K. I will use the word perpetual. Those in the know, rest assured, we will cover that. So the Age of Terra really comes to a close with the advent of the discovery of the warp. And then from that, warp drives. Now, it's within a millennium, you now have warp drive capable craft and the Navigators. They both come into existence. I do not believe that it was a coincidence. I believe that the Navigators were genetically engineered to be able to operate in the idea of the warp travel.
I have a question.
You looked like you had a question, Ben. I think we were both waiting for you.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry. Right.
you did.
Okay,
You
right.
looked pensive.
If Navigators were kind of came on the scene at the time when warp drive, so this is the end of the Age of Terra. The Emperor isn't a part of it. Humanity isn't actually united as a whole, like you say. It's still kind of country based, or kind of tribal in a way, faction based. Don't the Navigators require the Astronomicon, great convention, to navigate the warp? And doesn't the Astronomicon require the Emperor to bond with the Psychers before they're plugged in like light bulbs?
That is what eventually happens. In terms of the powers of the Navigator, they can make short jumps. They can make short kind of hops, blind jumps.
Right.
From system to system. But they can't go from one side of the galaxy. They can't go from one segmentum to another in one jump.
Right. Okay.
They will eventually, for larger expansion, for travel over larger distance, they will need the Astronomicon and thus, of course, the Emperor.
Gotcha.
The Astronomicon really is constructed at the kind of close of the ages that we're covering here. So you're looking at about, the year 30,000 roughly is when these kinds of structures and bureaucracies that you're describing come into place.
Okay.
So
one last question about that last age. So the Age of Terra, humanity is moving out to stars. They're not a unified body yet.
No.
Would it be safe to say that a lot of we're corporations? I know not much is known about that period of time, but in terms of kind of the ownership of these large ships and whatnot, is that going to be more corporation based, or is it going to be more kind of governmental based
I think that really for large scale enterprises like this, it must be governmental based. Now, corporations, have the innovation and the technology to be able to assist with these things, but in terms of the sheer taxable base to be able to get that money in to create these things, it has to be states. It has to be a government that feeds in to these things. Now, it's important to realize that companies exist on all planets, in all space of the Imperium of Man. Every planet has an almost infinite slew of companies handling aspects that aren't directly overseen by the Adeptus Terra, the actual administrative body of the Imperium. They do contract out these things, and it's based on the technology level or the technological level of the planets that they're on. Right, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So with the advent of the discovery of the warp and the coincidental arrival of both warp drive technology and navigators, we enter something called the Age of Technology. It's also referred to as the Dark Age of Technology. And this really is an explosion of colonization and expansion. And because ships now are able to do a couple of short jumps, whereas before it would take, a lifetime to cover, they can now cover that in a matter of days. You start seeing obscenely enormous wealth being generated by traders who have access to these kind of what are they called? Giant freighters who have a capacity to do short warp jumps. So this is where you start seeing the human race spread out from the segmentum solar into the different segmenta, and you see an expansion there. And of course, at the borders, at the forefront of all of these expansions, you're seeing frontier worlds being established, and you're coming into aggressive contact with the Xenos aliens. And again, you must by default be coming into contact with warp entities and demons and the manifested pawns of Nurgle, Khorne, and Tzeentch as you're accessing the warp.
Mr. Chris.
Oh, Mr. Chris, I apologize.
No, that's fine. It's nothing important. But I don't think you've covered...
Oh, I'll carry on then. Sorry, Chris.
I just want to let you know my question is irrelevant. Carry on. Are you going to go over how and when warp energy and warp travel was discovered?
No, because it's not really been written down.
Okay, fine. Just one day, woke up, hey, warp energy. Now we can do this.
Yeah.
Shazam.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bam. So it's as these expansions are happening, you're starting to see kind of cultural transitions from the early, within Segmentum Solar, within the original sphere of expansion for humanity. You're starting to see a kind of a bureaucracy, a kind of federalism that emerges centered on Terra as the kind of the arrogantly named home planet. So you're seeing a technology transfer, an information transfer. You're seeing trade. You're seeing cultural development. It's also at this time you're starting to see the transit. We mentioned last episode about the move for knights from agricultural machinery, dealing in animal husbandry, to war machines and kind of feudal nobility. Are you laughing at animal husbandry?
He totally did. I saw him.
It's one of the best jokes I ever heard. Who was the guy who sang the Element song? You know.
Oh,
the one that did...
oh God, that's going to kill me.
They May Be Giants, wasn't it?
No.
It was.
No, that's the Big Bang song. No,
it was Tom Lehrer.
Tom Leonard.
Tom Lehrer.
Tom
Lehrer. Lehrer.
He told a great joke, which was, I went to college to study animal husbandry, but they caught me. I love that joke.
Excellent.
They caught me, so I had to stop. So you're seeing the early kind of existence of a human government, or a human governance, not necessarily a human government.
Would they have been rediscovering lost human worlds at that point? Because if you were saying that in the Age of Terra they'd have travelled for X number of generations, and those worlds established would have in fact turned their true origins into myth, or maybe even forgot about them entirely. If you suddenly had warp travel and then Earth or Terra starts to become the central point of governance, like you say, would they have started to reconnect with those worlds and show them that that's where they came from?
Literally what I just said.
Was it? Was it? Fuck.
So there's a specific point you're making, and the answer is yes. As this kind of connection, communication and trade and so forth, they would start to rediscover the planets on the kind of outer edges of the sphere, or stuff that had kind of fallen away. There was still quite a healthy amount of records available at that time. So they could trace, you're looking at 15,000 years worth of travel. So you're reconnecting with a culture on a given planet, but they perhaps have not been isolated on that planet. They themselves may have colonized other worlds, either within a
Right.
system or the one system over, that kind of it. So it was kind of a glib answer, but yes, that's you're starting to see contact, let's call it. You're starting to see cultural contact between different human colonies, and eventually, over time, over thousands of years, you see a kind of a human sphere, an interstellar one government is formed over this. But it's very
New
much,
world order, new galactic order.
yeah, but it's very much one built on cultural exchange and trade. So very much like a UN style deal.
Right.
And eventually, a group known as the Men of Gold. These are like great thinkers and leaders and scientists and this kind of thing. So they create a kind of sub-faction, a new race called the Men of Stone. And they are dedicated to creating a connective interstellar society dedicated to the advancement of science and technology. So it eschews the idea of religion and the idea of faith and of superstition, and focuses purely on scientific achievement. And they become ridiculously wealthy as the kind of coffers of these planets are drained into their own to be able to fund technological advancement and more exploration. So you see a further explosion across the stars. Really, you're looking at almost to the edges of the currently defined segmenta. So you're looking at the population of the galaxy.
Wow.
Fucking mind blowing. Just like the concept of like populating the galaxy, the steps to get there, the thousands, the millennia it takes, and the challenges. Like you say, right, you've just shotgunned a bunch of ships into the depths of space, intergalactic space. Well, it's not intergalactic because it's within the galaxy, but out into space. It takes thousands of years, so many variables, so many failures, so many successes, and everything in between. After you've got then the technology to catch up with them, you've got to kind of cast this net over them and reconnect and herd them into line again. It's fucking mad.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So as this advancement is proceeding, the Men of Stone then create something called the Men of Iron. These are autonomous AI within variously sized robotic bodies.
Sorry, the men of stone. Did you say there was a men of gold as well?
The Men of Gold were the kind of leaders and thinkers and scientists that created the Men of Stone. And the Men of Stone were scientists and, arguably warriors, but great kind of, they were practical rather than theoretical. They were
right, but all human.
Arguably human, yes. They were seen as part of humanity.
Right.
So these Men of Iron ultimately, unfortunately, rebel against their human creators, and an apocalyptic conflict broke out across human space because these Men of Iron were spread throughout the galaxy.
And what were they? Sorry, were they robots?
They were, they were AI, but some were in robotic bodies. Some were installed into like governance systems, defense systems, this kind of stuff. So imagine Skynet, right. Galaxy-wide.
Right.
Blimey.
Maybe or maybe not connected to each other, but certainly not a single kind of mind governing this rebellion. Unfortunately, this destruction, this absolute catastrophe, shattered the single empire of human space. And coincidentally or not, depending on how you view the Chaos Gods, in the wake of the destruction, in the wake of this devastation by the Men of Iron, it became accepted that AI was completely verboten within humanity. There would no longer be thinking machines created and used to such an extent. And any scientist working on such a thing would be put to death for the sake of the society. because of the calamitous impact that these men of iron had had.
So does that have anything to do with the whole lobotomized nature of, is it servitors?
Servitors, exactly right. You cannot create a machine that thinks for itself to be able to achieve a series of tasks. So you have created what's referred to as monotask servitors. You have various flavors of them. You've got like loading servitors that load up stuff onto vehicles. You've got Medicaid servitors, which are like doctor's assistants, and they inject you with various things to make you feel better. You've got combat servitors, surveys, like whatever task you can think of, no matter how menial. There is a lobotomized human augmented with robotic parts ready to lend a hand and or claw.
They're like the squig of 40K. There's a servitor for everything.
No, I think you'll find that the squig of 40K is the squig.
Are there squigs in 40K?
Oh, yes, there are squigs, my friend.
Okay, fine, good. I'm glad to hear that.
I can't wait to that episode. What kind of servitor do you need in your life right now, Kral? What kind of servitor?
I need a put my pants on servitor. That'd be great. Having to bend over and pull my pants off.
That's going to have to be one hell of a lobotomy.
I've just I've yet to put my socks on, so my feet are cold. So I think I might need a pumice stone servitor.
Gross.
Attention all adepts of the machine god. Are you seeking reliable protection for yourself or your valuable assets during the dangers of an explorator fleet? Look no further than the Iron Man Bodyguard Service, the premier choice for personal security in the Mechanicum. Our highly trained bodyguards are skilled in combat, tactics, and covert operations, making them the ideal choice for any situation that requires swift and decisive action. We understand the constant dangers faced by those who serve the Onisia and are dedicated to ensuring your safety at all times. Don't leave your safety, or the safety of your valuable technological assets, to chance. Choose the Iron Man Bodyguard Service and rest assured that you are in capable and trustworthy Machondrites.
So at the end of this great war with the Men of Iron, there's a coincidental, in quotes, event where we see human psychers, human magic users, humans who are able to access the warp and channel those kind of raw powers, begin to appear in very large numbers across the entirety of human space. Now, if we accept that these manifestations, like we touched earlier on, like Nurgle, the birth of Nurgle was reflected as the Black Plague on Earth. What we're seeing here is the start of the fall of the Eldari reflected across the galaxy. So we're seeing humans who are able to touch the warp begin to be born out as a result of the kind of psychic power and the psychic waves of the Eldari as they begin to become corrupted. So as a result of this, as a result of the sudden possession of human psychers, the sudden creation of portals, warp portals within the bodies of some of these poor people, humanity en masse is exposed to the knowledge of demonic entities, the knowledge of demons. And ultimately, this leads to the collapse of the kind of interstellar nature of human civilization across the galaxy. And we close out from the dark age of technology into what's referred to as the Age of Strife, also referred to on Terra as Old Night, where everything is cut off from everything else.
Oh, no.
Wow. What? And sorry, why was it cut off? Because of
the discovery of warp through the birth, the baby boom of human psychers out of nowhere.
But why did that cut off communication?
No, I'm not telling you. No. That will be in episode 75. Really, what we're dealing with here is the psychic echo of the 5 millennia collapse of the Eldari, I apologize. You're seeing the not only are psychers being born as a kind of bow wave of kind of hedonistic psychic pleasure coming out of the crone worlds, where the Eye of Terror would eventually be formed, but you're seeing warp storms start to be created within the real world as the excess that the galactic spanning Eldari Empire is going through causes the warp to kind of merge with the real world in a kind of undulating fashion. And these warp storms completely disrupt the kind of blind short jumps that navigators can make, because there's no astronomicon, there's no lighthouse, so they can't make huge jumps. You're also dealing with planetary systems that are fighting not only against the Xenos and other kind of human raiders, but now we're dealing with demons as well. And so they're going to...
Come on.
They're going to...
Give me a goddamn break. Yeah.
They're going to really start culling human psychers as much as they can. And that's where we start seeing this, I was about to say irrational hatred, but quite rational hatred, not perhaps justifiable, quite rational hatred of psychers. On some of these, like the feral or the feudal worlds, they're referred to as witches. So you get these great witch trials as the kind of psychers are dealt with. You start seeing a lot of mutation as well, because you're getting this power of the warp coming through. And as we've discussed on the fantasy podcast, that chaos, the stuff of chaos, or the warp in this instance, has a mutating effect. And so lots of humans are born either as abhumans, where you start seeing beast men, or they have various forms of mutations, so like tentacles, spikes, all the usual
additional
crunchy goodness that you see in these kinds of games. Yeah.
So am I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. Basically, at this point, you start seeing the birth of human psychers, psychic human babies, and warp storms and various warp entities start appearing everywhere. And this is due to the excess and of the Eldar. The Eldar are kind of at this point kind of in their web way, in a kind of parallel universe doing their thing, but whatever they're up to using the warp, it's now spilling out into the corporeal world. Is that what's happening because of the Eldar's habits and behaviors?
It's sort of, yes. You're really dealing with, like, the webway is sort of protected from chaos, as much as something can be. What you're really looking at is just the complete degradation of the Eldar psyche in the real world. So you're looking at the crone worlds, you're looking at colony worlds as well, and you're looking at spacecraft as they're traveling through space. All of these are they're like pulsing with raw psychic energy.
Throbbing.
Well, yeah, actually, do you know what? Throbbing is a good word, because you're seeing like the Eldari just give in to every single hedonistic instinct. Nothing is denied. The word no longer exists. All discipline is gone as they just descend into complete and total anarchistic hedonism.
So it's it was that, as you say, anarchistic hedonism that was being done in the corporeal world that was causing this, or because did the Eldari exist predominantly in the corporeal world at this stage, or were they mainly in the webway, or were they across both?
No, they are a physical race. So as we mentioned, I think last episode and a few episodes before that, they took control of the webway from the old ones when the old ones passed. So the Eldar are a race of the corporeal world. They have set up settlements and cities within the webway, but that's like those settlements and those Eldar don't really have that much of an effect on the corporeal world. So it's the ones that are actually in reality, the ones that are in the kind of physical reality that are causing this. I mean, this thing to bear in mind is they are a galactic spanning civilization, so they are everywhere.
Had the humans already encountered them during this expansion? So they knew who they were.
They knew of them, yeah.
Were they? Because they were on the other side of the galaxy. Is that right? Where the Eye of Terra?
No, they are up and to the left of Terra as you're looking on a map. So they're actually closer to Terra than the galactic core is, if you see what I mean. They're on the same side of there. So they're not. I mean, this is one of the things to remember within 40K. There's no such thing as a good guy. There's no good guys. But the Eldar are less hostile than orcs. And in general are far more Machiavellian. So they'll use humans to further their own ends. So there are some alliances, some outright wars. It's the same as any two cultures bumping into each other. Mr. Chris.
And so, just to clarify, Terrans came across plenty of Eldar during their golden age, as it were, whilst they were traversing the universe and finding new planets. They came up against, they encountered lots of Eldari. And was it amicable? Were the Eldari quite welcoming to them, or was it the complete opposite?
Yeah. Were they also not like, fucking hell, these aliens look exactly like us?
Ish. I mean, the Eldari do have quite a racist term for humans. It's called Mon-Ki. They call us monkeys, basically.
Wow.
Mon-Ki, or Monkey. So, they view themselves as superior in all aspects. One has to remember their star empire had existed for millions of years. And so humanity is still, they're not even out of the crib yet. And already these fuckers are spread across the galaxy like jam on a bit of toast. Good analogy, Darren.
Sure.
Thanks, Darren.
So they're not hostile to them, but they definitely we are better than you.
Yes, it really is though on a case-by-case basis. It depends on the Eldar you bump into.
Might have a beer with you, might call you a monkey. One of the two.
They'll call you a monkey, but some of them will at least wait till you're out of earshot. So, as these worlds are descending into kind of psychic horror, it's only these planets, these cultures, that are unbelievably draconian against the advent of those witches, those psychers, that survive this age of strife. I mean, this is a 5,000-year-long age of just insanity and terror. From the 25th millennium to the 30th millennium, the entire interstellar... I've forgotten a word.
Network.
The entire interstellar concern of human civilization shatters like glass. And this is where you start seeing a lot of cultures that devolve. So you'll go from civilized worlds back down to feral worlds after a demonic incursion or Xenos attack. And this is where you start getting, in a more kind of regular fashion, the concept that there are star gods, and the whole 25,000 years of human progress falls into myth and legend on some of these worlds. And you find that some worlds end up kind of trying to preserve some level of technology or information, and that then is protected by an elite group or a priesthood. So you start getting this kind of Illuminati style cultures developing on some of these worlds. But really, the biggest threat to humanity at this stage is its own ignorance, because it doesn't understand what's happening.
Right.
fully.
And some of these civilizations, like you say, are the concept of Terra and Earth is just myth now. They've
Yeah,
heard of this legend that is
yeah,
planet Earth, Terra, from where they think they descended or their ancestors
yeah.
came from before coming from the stars and then populating whatever this place is.
Yeah, and it very much kind of mirrors the kind of the thing we have in Earth, which is this kind of ancient aliens, the ancient astronauts idea that we came from the stars, or some gods descended down and gave us the gifts of civilization. The Anunnaki of the Sumerian Empire, of Sumerian mythology, and they came from a planet called Nibiru, and they traveled the stars, and it's
Yeah,
that
yeah.
level of kind of mythology that the 25,000 years of human endeavor falls into.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
So it's towards the close of this Age of Strife, as this period is called, this 5,000 year period. I've mentioned that some planets devolved from civilized to feral, but it also affected the biomes as well, because some planets were simply devastated with the weapons from the dark age of technology, either as cultures on a planet turned against themselves, or in a kind of last-ditched scorched earth defense against either demons or eldar or orcs or. An example would be the Blood Angel homeworld of Baal, or Baal. It was turned from this kind of verdant paradise into effectively a radioactive desert that was completely done. So you went from, like, I'm going to use the word arboreal simply because it seems to be our word. You went from this a paradise world effectively to a death world, where it's just the sheer amount of background radiation would fry a kipper. Not that they have space kippers. Who knows? Who knows what they have?
Space kippers.
Space
Fracking.
kippers.
Good for nothing, I'm telling you. Stop fracking, people.
For this whole period, one has to imagine that the universe that the humans are in, the galaxy, the very galaxy itself, it simply is a genocidal fight for existence. Humans are tortured, captured in their millions. They die in their billions, and really, it's the dark age of strife, or sorry, the age of strife is an apt name for it, or old night, as the kind of hopes of humanity and the hopes of a galaxy of humans disappears.
Blimey.
Yeah, so that's really, you're seeing a couple of kind of expansions and contractions of human kind of civilization, or galactic civilization, as they take over, or as they manifest this destiny that they own the stars. While all this is happening, Terra, our own happy planet Earth, has gone from being, the verdant paradise that we all seem to forget it is, starts turning into a hive world. It starts these great cities, these great conurbations, where the entirety of Scotland, for instance, turns into a single city. Not overnight, obviously, it takes a few days, but you end up with entire continents slowly being turned into cities, or strip
Single urban
mined,
centres.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was it, in the case of Scotland being urbanised, was it Glasgow or Edinburgh that was the dominant force there?
Don't you start.
Discuss.
Unfortunately, it was Perth.
Oh,
it was
Australia.
The Fifers took over. Yeah.
Would that kind of effect of like mass urbanization have been fueled in any way by kind of mass migration back to Earth, like it would back to Terra, should I say? Would there have been fear on that level in the kind of the close proximity to Terra, that the galactic empire was kind of falling apart and everybody kind of getting back to safety, or anything like that?
It wouldn't really have happened, because interstellar travel pretty much ceased during that time. So there,
wherever you were stuck, basically.
Wherever you were. I mean, it was so bad that even trips from the surface of Terra to the moon, which obviously, given our Latin bent, is referred to as Luna, even that was perilous. You'd flip a coin to make it in one piece, simply because the warp storms were so prevalent. But it was during this time, the kind of final 1,000 years of this Age of Strife, that you see the rise of a being who comes to be called the Emperor. So the Emperor of mankind walked the earth, and had in fact walked the earth for thousands upon thousands of years. For almost the entirety of human civilization, he had existed. He was a psyker bar none. I apologize. He's the strongest psyker with one exception. And he was part of a group called the Perpetuals. These are undying humans. These are humans who can be killed, but will come back to life.
Right.
Nagash style.
More successful than Nagash, and you have no idea how much it hurt me to say that.
Didn't need a fucking black pyramid, did he? Just pang, just comes back.
Bang. But there are a good handful of these beings peppered throughout history.
That's really interesting.
But what we see now is that how did the Navigators come into being? Who was the scientist that organized that? Who was the scientist that organized warp drives?
It was that cheeky character, the Emperor, wasn't it? It was them all along.
Were they the same character as the Emperor, or were they funded by the Emperor, or were they advised by the Emperor? So he has this hidden hand throughout the development of the human race, because as perpetuals, they take the long view. Not necessarily a beneficial view, not necessarily a altruistic view, but they are a guiding hand behind the scenes. Now, it should be understood that some of these perpetuals wanted nothing to do with anything. They just wanted to live a quiet life and maybe achieve some things, but to be largely left alone. But that became ultimately an impossibility.
Where was that detailed in the lore? The kind of the story of the Emperor, as it were.
It's really, the story of the Emperor, the first kind of story of the Emperor's birth, came about in one of the Realms of Chaos books, in a book called The Lost and the Damned, where it detailed his birth during the kind of Neolithic age on Earth in Anatolia, a region called Anatolia, where he was the result of, now this is going to sound weird, but stick with me. He was the result of hundreds of powerful shaman committing ritual suicide and focusing it on a pregnant woman.
Wow.
Whew.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of confused trauma, it's right up there.
Yeah.
But this, of course, it's the first mention of this kind of supernatural aspect of the Emperor, but it's not the only interpretation. There have been others through the lore. And really what we're doing here is we're extracting kind of the fancy nuggets from the Horus Heresy book series. This is where a lot of this is documented or either outright or by assumption or implication, sorry. So really we're entering a period of human history exclusive to Terra, exclusive to our planet Earth, called the Unification Wars. And this is where the Emperor begins unifying all the states of the planet. I mean, of course he does. It would be a stupid name otherwise, the Unification Wars. What's he thinking?
It sounds counterintuitive as well. A war to unify everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was essentially a unification war must be at its very core genocidal. Because it's either you are incorporated into, like Kral says, like it's a contradiction in terms. But if the end goal was the complete extermination of the other side, then there would, or to the point where they give up, that would then form unity, wouldn't it? So was that the aim? Was basically join me or we wipe you out?
Yes. is the short answer to all of that is yes. I mean, his goal, as described within the various Horus Heresy books, was to have a single world government, atheistic, which spread the concept of the manifest destiny of humanity, where the humans had a right to the universe that they found themselves born in. There were some other things going on in the background, but in general, he was trying to become the single leader of the human race, and thus it necessitated the complete genocidal erasure of certain cultures that refused to bend the knee. Now, during this time, he constructed armies. So we're looking at the kind of proto-imperial guard, referred to as the Imperial Army eventually, and these were SAS-style elite troops, but regiments upon regiments of incredibly disciplined, incredibly well-trained human troops that may have had some form of augmentation, either mechanical or biological, that gave them, an edge in battle. He also, from that stock, created the proto-space marines. These were the Thunder Warriors. These were the original augmented superhuman soldiers that
I read about
would assist him in the complete conquering and erasure of any other form of leadership. He was defended at all.
They sound very Mad Max, those guys.
Yes, absolutely. They're very, how would you describe them? They're very kind of, it'll be the second episode where I reference Blade Runner. But you remember, like the Nexus 6, the Roy Batty, Rutger Hauer character. It's those, but buffer, angrier, and instant to violence, and clad in
punch first, ask questions later.
Yeah, absolutely. But these were, fundamental to his capacity to be able to conquer the planet or reconquer the planet. He was himself surrounded by what's called the custodians, his bodyguard. And they were to, like humans were to the Thunder Warriors as custodies were to the Emperor. So these are true superhuman warriors, all converted from existing adults. They're not, they weren't genetically altered when they were younger. And so he was dealing with not only his own kind of desires, but he had to instill a faith and belief in adults that he was the best. He knew the way and could manifest the reunification that he and a growing number of people sought. He did end up having to put down a number of warlords, a number of countries, but ultimately the entire planet was brought to heel in the closing years of the 29th millennium. So as we're moving into the early half of the 30th millennium, we see that not only has Terra been unified under the Emperor, but Luna has been brought in. You're looking at allies with Mars. If you recall, Mars is a forge world of the cult Mechanicus, the kind of what would become the Adeptus Mechanicus, who worshipped the machine god. But through various kind of political dealings, accepted that the Emperor was a manifestation of this machine god. He was like an avatar of this machine god. Just about.
How does their worship of a god sit within the Emperor's goal of an atheist empire?
Well, if you'll recall from last episode, I said that the kind of cult Mechanicus, this worship, the Adeptus Mechanicus religion, they, as an entire kind of sub-faction of the human race are of the Imperium, but not part of the Imperium, if you see what I mean.
Right.
They are allies in a very kind of odd way, and have almost complete autonomy over their own systems and beliefs.
Right.
Yeah.
But just from the stuff that I read, it seems that the Emperor has a very zero tolerance policy for anyone that's not human, and certainly with regards to faith. Like when they reconnect a planet, if that planet has been isolated for so long that they develop their own faith, they're basically told that either dispense with that or die.
That's a short summary of it. It would say that it's a reaction to the acknowledgement that psychers exist and that the warp exists. He is trying to ensure that the idea of religion, the idea of spirituality, is erased from human consciousness, so that psychic capacity doesn't manifest, and thus humanity can exist for a lot longer without having to worry about demonic incursions and so forth.
Gotcha.
So he reunifies the solar system. So he has the solar system in his grasp. And it's about this time, by then, the Thunder Warriors realize that they're temporary. They start dying off. They start falling sick, that they don't have an expansive lifespan. They are tools to get the Emperor to where he wants humanity to be, but they're not part of it.
Shit.
Ooh, it's got to burn. It's got to burn, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a real stinger.
The official records say that, to a man, they fought to the death in the last battle to unify Terra. The most commonly held story is that they were slaughtered to a man at Mount Ararat in the Middle East, of Moses, where the Ark came to rest.
Right.
They were killed on the orders of the Emperor by the custodians, by the golden-plated bodyguard of the Emperor. And the custodians would just whip through the Thunder Warriors. Now, as revealed in some of the literature in the Horus Heresy, a handful of these Thunder Warriors managed to escape and exist up to and beyond the Horus Heresy, the great kind of cataclysmic war. So what you're seeing is the Emperor dispensing with anything he no longer needs, callously. He's taken a long view, a long racial view, rather than an individual life view. And thus, the Space Marines come into existence because he needs warriors not to reconquer a single planet or a single system, but to reconquer an entire galaxy. And so, over the bones of 1,000 years, in secret, he starts to develop the process by which these young boys can be turned into the superhuman soldiers of the Imperium. And actually, as part of the kind of final stand of the Thunder Warriors, the Custodes are aided by the first kind of companies of the first Space Marine Legion, referred to as the Dark Angels. It's the Dark Angels Legion. And they have a hand in putting down the kind of final, real kind of, what would you call it? The final stand of the Thunder Warriors.
That's sad, man.
Thus,
it's real sad.
The reunification war comes to a close, and we enter a period called the Great Crusade, where the Emperor sets his eye on everything outside of the solar system. And that, my friends, is where we will stop for this month.
Ooh. What a cliffhanger.
I know.
I am hanging off that cliff.
I should say, for anyone who's interested in 30K or the kind of history before the Great Crusade, I've left so much out that it's almost irrelevant. It would take an idiot's guide to cover 30 times what I've covered here. This is really just dipping our toe in the water. But it gives you an idea of human history from our own time through to the Great Crusade. Mr. Chris.
Yeah, it was zoomed out.
Up until that moment, you said it was at this point the Emperor had his sights on everything outside the solar system. Are you saying up in that point the humans had only colonized our local solar system?
No.
Okay, fine.
This was after the Age of Terra, the Age of Technology, and it's the tail end of the Age of Strife. So there's been...
They've expanded.
So
they expanded massively.
Yes.
Then there was the Age of Strife, which basically ruined all space travel and all space communication. So you have all of these little pockets of humanity are isolated. And then he unifies Earth and then sets out to reconnect.
I see.
Right?
He regrouped, and then at that point he was like, right, got all my ducks in order. Let's go fucking take over the galaxy.
Let's go and find the other ducks.
Yeah.
It's just a big old duck hunt.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Now, bear in mind that, next episode, not only will we talk about the Great Crusade, but we'll talk about why the Great Crusade was able to occur. Because remember, warp storms were everywhere during this time.
Yeah.
So what happens that allows that to occur? So that's a little teaser. We'll cover some bits at the start of next episode.
You son of a bitch.
So thoughts on the Emperor?
Oh, man.
Well, I tell you what,
he's a cunt.
That is I find that particular story really interesting, especially his kind of shady dealings before he made his existence publicly known. It was the first time I'd heard about these perpetuals, and I think one of the Horus Heresy books that I've read details. There's a story where a young emperor, who's obviously not the emperor yet, he's an unknown man. He goes and has a conversation with a guy in a church, and the church is being shut down, I think, as part of the start of the Unification Wars, and it's basically him, the emperor, disproving this guy's religion to him, and just saying it's futile.
That story is called The Last Church. It's the last religious structure, religious entity. Or public
Terra.
Religious entity on Terra, on the surface of Earth.
And I find that whole kind of phase fascinating, but there's just not a huge amount of information about it, is there?
No. I mean, there is, but we'd have to do a daily podcast, and I don't think I could cope.
We'll get there. You'd love it. Come on, guys.
I would love it.
Patreon.com/laying down the lore 40K. Let's burn Darren out.
Yeah.
So the amount of lore and the timeline is so vast. You're literally talking tens of thousands of years, of course.
Yeah.
Are there stories? You've got the Horus Heresy. You've got various books focusing on things. Do you get series of books and novels and tales and lore dedicated purely, and they don't go beyond, for example, the Age of Strife or the Golden Age of Terror, the first 15,000 years or something like that, and they've just countless books and novels and stories purely on that bit of time, for example?
No, unfortunately not. They would be great reads, but it wouldn't really be. It wouldn't have that 40K feel or 30K feel. You do get aspects of it in flashbacks within the Horus Heresy books, or the books of the Great Scouring, or when the kind of the beast, it's referred to, an orc warlord attacks the young Imperium. You do get kind of flashes and insights in some of the Eldar novels, in some of the Chaos novels, but in general, the bulk of the lore nowadays starts with the kind of Great Crusade section, which is the section we'll cover next episode. Yeah.
Gotcha. So it was all not just filler, but it was just the bedrock of the lore, really. And anything that is out, it's probably fan made or something like that. The meat of it is from 30,000 to 40,000, right?
Yeah, well, 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, what you do find, and I hope you see that it even that history serves as the bedrock upon which 30K and 40K are built, or have come to be built, because what we just discussed in this episode was literally 3 or 4 paragraphs in the first edition of 40K. It's something that was so light it wasn't explored. But you have to remember that was 35 years ago, or more than 35 years ago.
Sure.
So, the lore has developed. So this narrative that we're talking about in this kind of introductory series has taken 35 years to be developed in any great level of detail. Certainly not a level of detail we're discussing here. This is a summary of summaries.
Wow.
As we move forward, yeah.
Whew, blimey. But yeah, absolutely enthralling. That is, like, again, just the concept of the expansion of humanity, and then you're tasked with the fact of exactly, trying to fucking herd that situation into the direction you want as well.
Yeah.
The managing logistics is just bonkers. You're going to need some psychics.
So you're in the year 40,000, Crow. You have a time machine. You can go back
40,000
any time you want, right? So Age of Strife, Age of Terra, so the expansion, pre-warp drive, then the Age of Technology, so pre-Emperor Unification Wars, but post warp travel.
That's when the AI went bonkers, wasn't it, though? Yeah.
Then the bonkers AI phase. Then the Age of that was the Age of Technology. Then the Age of Strife, where the Eldar started bonking the whole universe into, the whole galaxy into chaos.
Submission. Yeah.
So complete disconnection, and then Unification Wars, and then the Crusade, which we obviously we haven't covered that yet. Which of those phases would you like to go back to?
You've got to start at the beginning. That sounds like the kind of most progressive, enlightened and hopeful time in the whole thing, right? Everything else just went backwards from there.
Absolutely.
So I'll go for the first 15,000.
I would say the Age of Technology sounds pretty dope, actually, because you've kind of expanded and then everything's starting to connect, and you've got the technology to like travel, and that's more prosperous than the 15,000 years where you're sat on an arc ship.
That was the latter 15,000 years, wasn't it? So you got the men of gold or something like that, the golden men who created the men of stone,
the men with the golden balls.
Who created the men of iron with iron balls.
With iron balls.
So that was that period.
Yeah,
okay, that was cool. Yeah, that was them peaking, wasn't it? And then after that was when the AI went.
Oh, it was all shit after that. Like, yeah.
Skynet went self-aware, and yeah.
And everybody was asking to borrow your motorcycle and your clothes and your boots.
I like the story of the expansion, and also how after generations and thousands of years, the myth of Earth kind of fades into myth, I guess. It's been told in so many different ways, like you say, in our own histories of, we are descended from beings from the stars, and films. What was the film? The Alien film, Prometheus, that comes to mind as well.
Yes,
similar kind of idea, wasn't
that kind
it?
of idea.
Yeah, it's cool. Where would you go and live in those eras, Dar? I reckon it's the Age of Strife, isn't it? You dark motherfucker.
He's an angsty motherfucker, isn't he? Yeah.
Do you know what?
Is, isn't he?
Do you know what?
He wants to go and live with the Eldar.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
I guess it depends who you are, isn't it? Like, if you are the Eldar, you don't care for nothing except for that next hit of whatever excess you're going to get. So, you're having the time of your life, I guess.
Sounds like the Barber lads.
I should say that there is a rather amusing miniature, which is in fact one of the Men of Iron.
Oh, really?
It's a robot. He refers to himself as an Imperial robot, but it's a robotic figure from the Blackstone Fortress game, and he's referred to, his name is UR-025, and he refers to himself as an Imperial robot to get around the kind of ideas that he might be an AI. And what he's done is he's quite surreptitiously welded the symbol of the Imperium onto his chest quite clumsily. So he's like, "Hello, nothing to see here. I am I'm not sentient. I'm controlled by this Adeptus Mechanicus priest just here, who's terrified for his life."
That's awesome.
So they do. I tell you what,
cool.
we'll pop that image in the old the show notes.
What is it? He's an AI in denial. He recognizes his own flaws. It's like, I might turn on my masters. And so he's just he tells himself that he's not AI.
He's in denial.
Terrible.
What he's done effectively with welding that the symbol onto his chest, the Imperial Aquila, the kind of two-headed eagle, he might as well have welded it on where a moustache would be, because that's the kind of level of disguise that he's going for.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Right. Shall I wrap up?
Nah.
Sure.
All right, that's all from us. Thank you so much for listening. Details and imagery for the topics we've discussed in this podcast can be found on our website at layingdownthelore.com. We also have all our previous episodes on there, release schedules, merchandise, and of course you can sign up for the Laying Down the Lore newsletter, which includes exclusive info about upcoming releases, behind the scenes chat, and some extra lore not covered in the podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard in this episode and you want to support us, head over to patreon.com/layingdownthelore40k and sign up today for as little as £3. This will give you access to our Discord server so you can come and tell us exactly what you think of us. We'll be back again soon displaying just how little Chris and I know. Until then, goodbye.
£3 for the tier 1 patron. That's amazing value.
All hail the Emperor.
Say that louder.
That!
You're an asshole.